Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations, they teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. Reflect to project. Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Steve Jobs. Phil, what are your thoughts on this one to kick us off today?
Yeah, interesting quote, isn't it? Following your heart, following your intuition. I think that's, it's developed over time and part of the process.
Yeah, I think the whole conversation is about like living in sync with, what are the things that just naturally feel the right way. And, sometimes there are definitely things that don't feel the right way. And sometimes you're learning through something until it becomes the right way because you've got to overcome some sort of challenge. But inherently, does it actually feel good that this is the sort of thing that you could become great at? And if you're in a position that you can get to that level of connectivity, it makes a huge difference in your overall performance on the inside of business. Now, Phil, today we've got a great conversation because we're going to talk a little bit about reflecting to projecting. And Harris Real Estate has gone through a bit of a milestone. What's happened?
We've just ticked over 15 years in business. Josh, it's gone very quickly since you and I sat down and signed a napkin in a restaurant that you were going to be a partner. That hasn't quite happened yet, but it's gone very...
Still waiting for the partnership docs, mate. But you know what? It was interesting because we also just ticked over the milestone of 15 years of Blueprint.
Wow.
And so literally you start having a quick look at that and you think, wow, the time has absolutely gone by super fast. But mate, what are some of the things that you've learned over that period of time? And I guess the things that you think, I wish I had have known that these were some of the choices along the path. And it was interesting. I was talking to someone the other day and I said, when I was at school and we were finishing and we're doing careers or whatever, no one ever spoke to me about the concept that you could actually get paid by the hour or you could get paid on result. And I never knew that was actually an option. And literally, and this is you got to be careful because sometimes you can chase an entire career where you're baked in on a particular thing that you didn't realize that you were actually baked in on. And literally then it becomes difficult to change a little bit later on down the track. So mate, let's get into that 15-year things. What are some of the lessons that you've learned over the course of running Harris and being in business?
I think one of the biggest lessons is when you first start out in your business, Josh, as you would relate, there's a whole lot of fear and anxieties and worries, and it's almost like the first major milestone that you want to achieve are we actually going to have a business in 12 months' time? So I think that up front, I probably could have done with you've got people in your corner, I had people like yourself helping out, but you really do need that mentorship and guidance almost. It's almost like your first year as a salesperson in real estate, where it's am I going to be here in 12 months' time? So I think if you can overcome that in your first 12 months and try and make it more maybe based around some more minor goals along the way, which is, if I can hit X amount of revenue and have X amount of staff, just keep it very, very simple. So you kind of need to have this split mindset, I think, Josh, when we first started in business, which is there's some short-term things that you want to be really focused on, making sure you're surviving, but at the same time, you've still got to have that really big, inspiring vision of where you want that business to be in 3 years' time or 5 years' time or wherever it might be. So I think kind of one of the bigger things that would have been up front is just having confidence to back the process and be really clear about where you want to be.
And if you think maybe 6 months out from starting the business and you now think to where you've got, was that even remotely on the agenda? If, I don't know, 3.5, 4,000 properties under management, 4,000 sales, whatever the numbers are. Did you ever think about that, literally before you were starting Harris, that's where it would end up? Or was it very much along the lines of, if we could just turn $1 and make a profit, that'd be great as a starter? Yeah,
there was never the intention to be at the size or the volume that we are today. And I think that's obviously come as a result of the internal focus, what I'm really passionate about. You and I are probably very similar from that perspective, Josh, which is we actually just love to help other people grow. And so for me, I see Harris Real Estate, it's almost less about external customers. For me, the entire focus is how do I help people internally, be that property managers or salespeople, how do I actually upskill them, help them with mindset, help them with health, help them with growth. And so that was all I was focused on when I was starting Harris Real Estate. And so in terms of where it's ended up today, that's almost just been a byproduct of just getting better at building and growing people on the inside.
And that can actually be the entire foundational idea, right? To say that, what we want to do is we want to just help people to grow and be really good around what they do. How long did it take you to get rid of the pink?
I'm still trying to. It's funny. Well, people don't realise, Josh, there was never any intention to have pink as a colour for Harris. You're one of the few people that probably know. I think on day one, we were rolling out like 3 or 4 different coloured signboards across Adelaide, which a lot of people don't know. And I think we had pink, blue, and white and black. I think there were 4 colours we were rolling out, just to be, it was unique and it was different, to be really bold. And then the pink was the first board that came out, and somehow like it stuck. It's almost gone. There's still a few around.
Yeah, the amazing thing about it is that, like, I look at the sign and then you're like, oh no, I'm colorblind. Is it pink? I'm like, come on, bro. So this is kind of interesting part about business success. The foundational days of Harris versus Harris today. Give us a bit of an idea about how many people have you got now working inside the organisation?
We've got a little over 300 now. I think about 320, 330. We started out with 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little bit different now.
And when you first started, what was your initial role?
I was like most principals who start, I was wearing probably half a dozen hats. And so the first key one was like chief revenue. I had to get out there and list and sell. Like if I didn't list and sell, so I had one other business partner at that time. If we didn't list and sell, there was no revenue. So driving revenue was really key. And I remember my key roles when I first started. All I wanted to do, Josh, is I wanted to list and sell because we needed revenue to keep the doors open. And secondly, my focus was purely on training others to get better at listing and selling. That was all I was focused on. Anything else I tried to outsource.
And you were one of the major writers inside of the business at the time.
Yes.
What percentage revenue do you reckon you would have been in the first year?
We were probably doing, this game, 15 years ago, we were probably doing maybe first year, we probably did $3-4 million in fees, and I was probably writing just a bit over 1 for that.
Yeah. And so, you're close to a third of it. And there's each stage of growth actually brings with it its own challenges. And one of the great challenges was about the conversation of that you were a salesperson, and then you were reluctant, if my memory serves me correct, to want to be the CEO at the time. And you tried. You had different CEOs come through the organisation over that period. Yeah. Is there anything that you kind of learn out of that? Like literally was that the right thing? Or do you think that now you just wish that you had have lent in earlier in doing that CEO function?
Well, I do part of the CEO functions. I'm still not the CEO. It's probably still not a hat that I feel really super comfortable in, Josh. I think, as you know, part of the growth and growing in your business and growing as a person is leaning into your own personal strengths and skill sets that you're really good at. So with a company the size of Harris Real Estate now, there's a whole, I guess, a portion of that CEO role that I'm not really interested in, such as talking with banks about funding, talking with suppliers, negotiating contracts, leases on buildings, buying buildings, all of those sort of things. That's not really where my passion lies. My number one passion, as you spoke about before, Josh, is like building and growing others. So now I kind of wear a half CEO hat, but I would say that the majority of the time is still built in that coaching and leadership role. That's what lights me up. That's what gets me excited. So you've got to kind of work out, there's that, I think there's not a predetermined rule that says if you founded the company that you must become the CEO. You can if you want, but I'm probably more inclined to play towards my skill set and my passions.
And as a major shareholder inside of the business, how important was it for you to set up a set of foundations that your executive leadership team could actually operate from? So when you think about purpose, mission, values, clarity about planning rhythms, making sure that you guys were really clear about how you go to make decisions around expansion or around brand, like that sort of stuff. Now, if you have a look at it, you're probably one of the most unbelievable leaders across the entire industry that actually has got a really disciplined approach on how you help others to plan and to grow inside of the organisation.
Yeah, and that's come with time though, Josh. I think it's very, very hard in those initial years when you're starting a business for young principals out there who are kicking off. I mean, you are just literally wearing multiple hats and going like an absolute bull at a gate, like a madman. You're listing, you're selling, you're recruiting, you're hiring, you're firing, you're innovating, you're trying to get to a conference, you're trying to implement new tech, you're trying to, there's a whole range of things that you're doing. So it's almost like mission, purpose, values, almost kind of the way I did it in the early years, Josh. I would say that I led by example, not by documented ethos, if that makes sense, which is hopefully my own personal values and mission and purpose kind of shone through as opposed to it being written on the wall, everybody knowing what we're doing. But I would say now you wind the clock forward 15 years, we are very structured. We're only talking a moment ago before. We just came out of a 2-day, our annual planning day with an external business coach that we use. So we met our whole exec team. And once again, it's a very, very relentless process over 2 days. And we go through the mission, the purpose, the values. We reassess our big, hairy, audacious goal, 3-year plan, 2-year plan, 1-year plan, quarterly projects. Like, it's a very, very disciplined process. And that was not there 15 years ago. So what I would say is that has really, really developed, particularly over the last 5 years. And I'd say we've even really dialed up hard in the last 3. But I think that's something that you progress into. But what I would say for the young principals is that the sooner that you actually do start to get that alignment, it's going to be a lot easier for the people around you.
Some of the big moments, like geographical spread, all of a sudden, puts a bit of pressure on the leadership function. Going from one office to a second office. Was that an interesting learning curve about like how you actually then had to try to learn to multiply culture across geographical locations? Initially,
when you spread office, that's done via purely energy and momentum and not based on system, strategy and intentionality. And I would say now that, we open an office now, we are very structured with the leaders that we put in there, process, all of those sort of things. And so that's definitely been a massive evolution as well. Once again, in those initial stages, if you're opening a second office, that's somebody who's just flying based on momentum, not necessarily strategy, and they're leaning into that.
How many offices have you got now?
We're 11 across the group.
And so as a part of that, do you ever look at an office and go, oh, geez, that's the weaker one out of the 11 and you've got to spend more time and energy around how do we change that, fix that?
Definitely. We would have spent, last week, 2-3 hours on that with our exec team at the 2-day planning, just looking at our offices now, Josh. But even those 11 offices, a lot of those are just built on momentum and energy as opposed to structure. You've got to think the industry that we play in, Josh, is a very non-structured, loose, fluid industry. Right? There's very few organizations that actually have 11 offices. Franchise is very different. Like that's one person with one office. Now it's different at the corporate. I get that. We dove in, and when we have definitely seen there's a number of offices that we have, Josh, that we looked at saying, well, we don't think we're quite culturally aligned in the right space. And by the way, you've got to give yourself some grace as well, because 4 or 5 of those offices have only come on board in the last 18 months. And we are learning, Josh, we're finding it's about a 2-year process to get officers into a position of where we want them to be. And so what we established over that 2 days, we've got officers that aren't quite culture aligned, but then there's also operationally, they're not quite right either. And so one of the outcomes that have actually come from the 2-day planning day is we're actually building out this 10-point non-negotiable, almost like that 10-point mapping process for an office, that here's our expectations around culture, around operation, around brand, around people. And one of our chores for the next, or our outcomes, I should say, for the next 90 days is sit down with each of our external shareholders and just run a mapping process against, well, here's where we are on a scale of 1 to 10, and here's where we want you to be. And have there been any like really big lessons that you think over the last 15 years that you've been taught that really stand out in your mind that you wish you had have known were decisions, day one when you were beginning the business? I think probably the biggest lesson is you have to, as quickly as you possibly can, if you don't want to, take the long road or the hard. There's never an easy road, so there is no easy road. But the sooner that you surround yourself with people that have walked the path prior, right? So there are a lot of people who have kind of talked it, but there's not a lot that have really, really walked out that path. So you've got to surround yourself with people that have been around it for a long time, and that is going to actually expedite that process for you. So I would go early with surrounding yourself with a brotherhood of people that are on the same page and have gone the same journey before. So one of the major principles, and this is a great one, I think, Stephen Covey actually came up with this one, but the whole idea of start with the end in mind. And, Phil, when we think about the subject that we've been talking about, like the lessons over the course of the last 15 years, there is a bit of a conversation that literally that, it's fine to enter a business, but you've also got to think about an exit. When you start to think about the end in mind, did that ever come into the mind of day one of you being in business, is to say, hey, there might actually be a day that I'm not in business, and how would I build a long and enduring company that's not reliant upon a key person in order to be, rapidly successful? I think that's the ultimate. You and I talk about it a lot, actually. Like, that's the ultimate code to be cracked, which is building a real estate business that is non-dependable on the principal. So if you look at the traditional model across the country, like, it's entirely principal-centric, right? Which is, the average office is a high-selling, listing-selling principal, and there's maybe, 10 or 15 staff wrapped around that, which means if the principal goes, the business goes. That's the reality of the Australian real estate model. So when we first started, there was definitely not even a thought about where we would be in 20, 30, 40 years' time, Josh. It was more like, are we still going to be trading in 12 months' time?
Yes.
That was the size of the vision back then in day one. But now do I think about it? Yeah, absolutely. And probably what really drives me now, and one of the things you've really pushed inside our business, is trying to build a legitimate business that is not Phil Harris centric, which means the business, the brand, is bigger than the individual. And that goes against the grain of what the entire industry is really what I've ever seen. It's very, very hard to name any, Josh, where the business has actually gone on beyond the founder. So we're working very hard on that at Harris in terms of building out the quality of leaders, building out the brand, building out really more of a corporatized structure that is not just dependent on a leader's charisma and personality.
Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.